Why America Failed in Afghanistan, a 20-year analysis. The most powerful military machine of the 21st century, the force that crushed Hitler and consigned the Soviet Union to the dustbin of history, was ultimately defeated by a herd of mountain goats and century-old Kalashnikovs. This is not a work of fiction, but a bitter truth that emerged from the dust of Afghanistan. The question is, why did a superpower like the United States pour 20 years, over $2 trillion, and thousands of precious lives into Afghanistan, only to look back as it departed and see Kabul standing exactly where it was when the mission began, under the control of the Taliban? Let's examine whether this monumental American failure was merely a military defeat or a tale of strategic blindness whose lessons remain unlearned to this day. The story begins on that horrific day in September 2001, when two passenger jets struck the Twin Towers, the symbol of American economic might. Just weeks later, on October 7, 2001, President George W. Bush announced the War on Terror in Afghanistan. It was a mission of retribution aimed at capturing Osama bin Laden and dismantling his sanctuary, the Taliban regime. The initial months were a masterpiece of American firepower. B-52 bombers and cruise missiles pounded Taliban positions into rubble, and in just a month and a half, on November 13, 2001, Kabul fell to the advancing Northern Alliance forces. This victory was so easy that it lulled American leadership into a fatal misconception that military power alone could solve any problem. By 2003, with the Taliban seemingly shattered, the United States diverted its primary focus and vast resources toward Iraq. Here lies the first and most significant strategic error. Afghanistan was deemed mission accomplished and left to wither on the vine. George Bush and Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld spoke of building a democratic Afghanistan, but they never provided the necessary resources or sustained attention required for such a monumental task. The consequence was predictable. The Taliban retreated into the tribal areas of Pakistan, nursed their wounds, and waited patiently for their opportunity to return. When the next president, Barack Obama, took office in 2009, Afghanistan was once again engulfed in flames. Obama surged an additional 30,000 troops and pushed the Taliban back once more. But the military success proved to be a temporary bandage, because the U.S.-backed government in Kabul, led first by Hamid Karzai and later by Ashraf Ghani, was hollow at its core. This is where the second root of failure lies: rampant corruption. According to reports from the U.S. Department of Defense, over $140 billion were spent on reconstruction in Afghanistan, but a vast portion of it vanished into a black hole of graft, fake contracts, and useless projects. The greatest tragedy was the Afghan National Army. The United States spent approximately $85 billion training and equipping this force, but it proved to be a paper tiger. Soldiers received salaries, but these payments were often listed under the names of ghost soldiers, personnel who did not actually exist. When the United States withdrew air support and logistical maintenance in 2021, this army of over 300,000 men evaporated in just 11 days. The Afghan soldiers had weapons and training, but they lacked the moral justification to fight and had zero faith in their own government's survival. This failure was not solely the Afghan government's doing. It was a product of direct American policy. In 2020, President Donald Trump signed the Doha Agreement with the Taliban. In this deal, the United States secured promises from the Taliban not to allow Afghan soil to be used for terrorism and to engage in intra-Afghan peace talks. In return, the U.S. released 5,000 Taliban prisoners and committed to a full withdrawal of forces. Critically, the Afghan government was completely excluded from these negotiations. It was akin to deciding the fate of a man's house without ever consulting the owner. When Joe Biden assumed the presidency in 2021, he was bound by this predetermined agreement. Biden stated that he would not hand the forever war to a fifth president. Consequently, in July 2021, the United States quietly vacated its largest and most strategic military installation, Bagram Airbase, in the dead of night. This was not just the closing of an airfield. It was the definitive announcement that American resolve had evaporated. The Taliban, who had been waiting for this moment for decades, seized the psychological advantage and accelerated their offensive. August 15, 2021. The eyes of the world were fixed on scenes that represented the greatest humiliation of the American century. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani fled the country. Chaos engulfed Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul, with desperate citizens clinging to the wheels of U.S. military aircraft as they taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky. The United States managed to evacuate over 123,000 people, but it left behind its reputation and a profound sense of self-respect. What is the final accounting of this failure? Over $2 trillion spent, more than 2,400 American service members killed, and countless Afghan lives shattered. But the greatest loss was something intangible: the confidence of a superpower that was buried deep within the mountains of Afghanistan. America did not lose in Afghanistan because its military was weak. It lost because it refused to understand that while armies win battles, peace and governance can only be won through the hearts and minds of the people. And the key to the hearts of Afghanistan was perhaps one key that America never truly possessed. Will the superpowers of the future remember this lesson, or is history doomed to repeat itself once more?